Hello and welcome to Pursue the Talks, brought to you by Pursue, a bespoke leadership coaching and development company with a mission to create, nurture and develop inspiring leadership across the global education sector, supported by the Federation of British International Schools in Asia. My name is Nicholas Mackay, Associate Professor, Certified Professional Coach and Director of Pursue. And I will be your host in this fourth series of conversations exploring high performance in education. We'll bring you cutting-edge stories from across the global education sector, delving into the minds of recognised education and industry experts to find out about the challenges and main issues they are facing and to gain insights into what is meant by high performance. It's been wonderful to get some more feedback over the last week. I love this one from Simon. Thanks again, Nicholas, for the brilliant career professional development, or as it's now called in my world, off-the-job training, gold dust advice. Thank you very much, Simon, for the feedback. Very much appreciated. As always, please feel free to feed into our Pursue conversation. You can visit us on LinkedIn and Twitter at Nicholas Mackay and Pursue, and also via our website at pursue.com. In today's conversation, I'm delighted to welcome Dave Strudwick, Principal at Real School. This is a brand new school in Budapest focusing on making the world a better place. Dave has worked as a teacher and leader in mainstream and specialist settings in the UK, US and China. He's a published author with a great deal of experience around leadership, learning needs, habits and mental health. He's been a head teacher and co-founded 3 schools, including the UK's first trauma-informed school. He has developed and supported online schooling, including leading a virtual school through a blended and personalised approach, which was referred to as a beacon of hope for its project-based approach. Dave, thank you for joining me from Budapest.
Thank you for the invite. It's really great to be with you.
Fantastic. So straight into, as I always do with my guests in this series, is what's your definition of high performance?
I thought it's a really great question as well. It's good to get straight to the point of things.
Straight in there, Dave, yeah.
Absolutely. It's a great question because I think it's one that in the busyness of accountability towards things, whether it's personal or external accountabilities, we can so easily get into making assumptions about what high performance is and not really stop to ask ourselves that question. And one of the places I went to when I started to think about it was the assumptions we make about why children are at school. I know as a young teacher, I can remember talking to children about this and being really surprised by the various answers that they would come up with. And it's probably similar for teachers and leaders and schools and organizations. So I thought it was a great question. And to me, it's all about quality. Again, that's fairly subjective, but I think we know when we're in the company of great people, of great things, when that sense of quality can really shine through. And I'd look at that in a range of different ways. For me, part of it is about making beautiful work. When children achieve something that they are proud of, that's beautiful for them. It's just a magical moment as a teacher, as an educator, to be alongside someone who's proud of what they've achieved when they realise that they've moved forward. So, part of high performance for me is about that sense of progression, of stretch, of challenge, and that's very personal. I remember taking kids on a residential and doing interviews as a research piece around all the different adventure activities, and I was absolutely gobsmacked when this girl said to me, what was the most adventurous part of the residential was making a cup of tea. And I was really perplexed by that.
Cup of tea?
Tell me more about that, because we've been climbing, abseiling, doing canoeing, kayaking, all these different amazing things. And so I asked her to tell me some more about it, and she explained at home she wasn't allowed to turn on the taps. So the idea that she could make cups of tea for adults and other children was just incredibly adventurous for her. And I think it's similar in terms of high performance. We can lose sight of how individual these things these things are. So there's something about it being beautiful. There's something about it developing something that is really memorable, like for that girl, something that is a kind of a wow moment, and something that develops understanding as well. I think when you have something that's not superficial, it's got a depth to it, you really develop understanding, you end up not having to memorize things. It's kind of in your muscles from that point on. You see the world a little bit differently. And I think that would be the last part for me of what makes something really high performance is in relation to the context, the purpose sitting behind something. And again, I think that connects to the parts about what makes you proud. If you're doing something really purposeful, whether it's as an adult or a child, that has a huge impact.
That's great. That's a lovely segue into my next question about being purposeful, Dave. Tell us a little bit about your first of all, your role and more specifically, your school and their outlook.
Yeah. So I've been really lucky to join Real School in Budapest, and we are really looking to innovate in a very purposeful way to dream and build a beautiful world. And we're looking at creating the opportunities for children for them to know they've got the agency to do that. So that includes looking at areas such as sustainability, but also helping young people learn how to navigate a rapidly changing world. Those kind of areas, which in a more traditional school, children can still get to some very high standards, but are they just trying to memorize? Are they just going through a process for an exam rather than to develop the kind of ability to know what to do when you don't know, or to that ability to raise really great questions, that the aspects around creativity. And so my role in relation to the school is, as principal, to create the conditions and the support and the challenge to enable people to realize our vision and to turn our dream into a reality.
And I suppose, how do you create the conditions, Dave, to allow that creativity to flourish?
I think that's beyond a PhD question, isn't it? It's a really great question, and I think whatever I come up with, it's going to be a series of sound bites, and it's incredibly complex area. I think one of the things you do is you try to simplify the very complex, and give people some handholds to maneuver, to climb with. I think particularly if you're trying to do something that's innovative, there isn't necessarily always the metrics to support that. Innovation, by its definition, doesn't have the evidence base. And that's not to say there aren't great things already happening in education. There's absolutely fantastic things all over the world, as you well know. And there are times when you're trying to move from the things that we've done before into something slightly different. So if as a teacher you've had that process of, I'm going to tell you about what we're going to do, and then I'm going to teach you about things, and then I want you to write some notes about it, and then you're going to write an essay. That's maybe quite different than the process of, actually, we've got a problem that we're going to try and solve, and we don't know what the solution is. And actually, my role then shifts in terms of, rather than telling you about things, of being more that kind of, as sometimes people refer to, a sort of guide on the side, the ability to coach, to choreograph situations and groups as well. I think the coach is trying to draw out often from the individual's own ideas, to enable them, to empower them. The choreographer is kind of drawing from a range of people's ideas, but they are going to create the dance. And there's times when you're conducting as well. So I think using those three processes of coaching, choreography, and conducting are probably all important in different times. you need to give space and confidence for people to experiment. I think, a big thing in my career has been about how I personally have dealt with failure and messing things up at times. And I think for people to really learn from that, you've got to create the kind of environment and the kind of quality of relationships where people know that even if things go wrong, actually that's okay, as long as we learn from it. So yeah, it's a really interesting area. I think modeling and being alongside people as well is a very powerful thing. I think that's where sometimes the opportunities that come in different kind of learning spaces can be super powerful. It takes it away from a kind of an observation of I'm coming in to watch you, so I can tell you what you should have done really, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Which you get in some schools. I mean, I felt I did a lot of observations in different jobs that I had on advisory levels, and actually often I learned more, I think, than the person that was being observed. I mean, you could see so much when you went to different places. But if you come alongside somebody and you're trying to solve something together, I think that's a different kind of environment. So I think that's part of what we're really trying to create here: the spaces, the teamwork, the diversity in a team as well, so that we can all add in different pieces to that vision and make that real.
I love the way you said that idea of coaching, modeling, and being beside someone. So I'm curious. I mean, I was speaking to a couple of clients yesterday actually about performance management. It was two executive head teachers that I'm coaching at the moment, about how to have more innovation around performance management. So you're not just doing the 3-bit cycle where you meet them once a term, and then by the time you've met them, then the targets are obsolete anyway. So in a school like you've outlined, like you're working and you're leading now, Dave, what's your approach to performance management in that setting?
It's a really good question, and we're in the process of establishing some of those things at the moment. I think part of it is, again, setting the climate. If performance management is a way that's almost a control mechanism, that's not going to leave you feeling empowered to take risks. So I think a big part of it isn't just the processes you use or the techniques that you're using. It's actually the culture that's being created. I think making it explicit to people that there are some places where we're actually all going together. We're really trying to develop and refine. There's areas where we're trying to tweak. We've already got something of quality, and we're trying to tweak and refine it and redraft it and polish it till we get to something of absolute beautiful quality. But the flip side of that is there are also going to be spaces where we don't know, and why don't we go and try some things? And one of the things that worried me at times when you'd hear things, for example, from the DFE, but it's certainly not to say it's solely from them, was this idea that a school would be outstanding from day one. And I think that depends on how you defining outstanding and what your version of high performance is. But if you're trying to create something that's very agile and can respond to the rapid changes in the world, part of that has to be a kind of a learning culture, and where mistakes and the opportunity to fail forward, if you like, is there. I think sometimes roles are really important in this as well, Nicholas. So sometimes as a principal, no matter how you see yourself, you do have that position that maybe doesn't make everybody feel that they're safest. For some people, it hopefully does. I hope I'm approachable and enabling. But the reality of it is, I can't take away the fact that I'm the principal. And for some people, they're going to feel more empowered and more enabled to innovate through working with other people. And that could be in some settings, from people from outside the school, where you create a kind of temporary system, a permission to think a bit differently. But it could be a colleague with a different role. or it could be that there's it could be part of a leadership development process, but it could be just a partnership that you just know there's two people that work really well together, or people that have got some complementary skills that you have an intuition that would add into each other's repertoire through coming together. So yeah, I've not really answered your question, but I've sort of skirted around it because I think it's such a complex one. And I heard accountability referred to as tender loving care with edge once.
I like that.
I really liked it. It kind of stuck with me. But I guess part of what we've got to ask ourselves in relation to innovation is where that edge is coming from. How much of that is intrinsic, and how much of that is coming from outside the individual, from elsewhere in the organisation, or from outside the school. And both have a value. I think they do. You want to be able to challenge yourself, your organisation, but what enables that intrinsic motivation for people to really push the boundaries and innovate. Giving time to dream, I think, is really huge in this.
It's time, isn't it? That always comes back as that scarce resource in schools. Time.
Yeah. It is a resource that is so important. I think teachers and head teachers probably even more so, principals even more so. We're very good at knocking up a plan. A lot of teaching is planning. A lot of leadership is putting together a plan. And the danger is we do that with premature clarity. So I guess the opportunity for imagination, if we really want people to innovate, how do we create that in our improvement cycle, that space and time for people to think, to dream, before they get into the actual making of activity and of movement forward.
And you mentioned there about challenging yourself. So in what ways, obviously just taking on a new job, Dave, so there's enough challenge in that itself, and move to a new country probably, but in terms of challenging yourself in your role, how do you go about doing that?
I love reading and researching. I'm probably not the most rigorous of researchers in terms of like academic research. I think I would find that a bit more that's a bit more out of my comfort zone. Right. So maybe I'm answering my own question. Maybe that's what I'd be given to. But I think the part of what I try to look at is where innovation is happening elsewhere in the world outside of education. That's always I find very interesting and often gives opportunities for thinking differently about what we could do in schools. I think part of where those things come from are different people that I think over time you get those kind of sources of people who will, in a 10-minute conversation, they're going to say something that makes you think so differently. Some of those for me are people that I work with in schools. There's a super head, David Samuels, at Mayflower in Plymouth, and he's somebody I really enjoy listening to and talking to. Really makes me think differently.
So what is it about him, Dave, that makes you think differently, makes you listen intently?
I think the way he looks at things that I thought I understood, and there's his level of understanding on certain areas. He'll just challenge in a not in a provocative way at all, but just in a really intriguing way. He'll make me think a little bit differently and want to go and find out more. Barna, the founder of Real School, with his wife Vicky, Barna particularly for me, I think his the way he looks at entrepreneurship, I really like the way he thinks about things. And on the science side, Bo Lotto, I've had the pleasure of working with his blog. He's cycling around America at the moment, and I can't remember if it was turning left or turning right, but it was basically that he was going on this really random journey. His whole scientific field around neuroscience is based around perspective and perception. And every time I read his blog, it's just like, oh yeah, that's so interesting. And because it's about perspective, and therefore about people and relationship and making sense of things, I find that as an area a great way of breaking through possibility for new thinking and new ideas in schools.
And you mentioned previously, Dave, about setbacks and how that's been really beneficial for your own journey and development. So which setback, not to pause on the negatives here, but which setback kind of stands out for you, and what did you learn from it?
I think the most significant one for me in terms of sort of fear and criticism was probably when I was very young, and with my mum. And I had a lovely childhood, so I'm not going for the sympathy vote or anything like that. But right. She was obviously having a bad day, and she just completely lost it with me and my sister. Got very angry, and said, "Right, I'm gonna phone social services." I mean, I don't even know where she was coming from in that moment, because she was just such a loving, caring parent. But she clearly that day was not having a good day, and you can kind of see that as an adult looking back. But as a 5-6-year-old, it was pretty scary at the time, and I think that left me in a place where I really felt I needed to get things right, because otherwise, what might happen? I could end up in a children's home, and I think that had a huge impact on me growing up, of wanting to get things right, and therefore of not always innovating, of being fearful of any forms of failure. I can remember sort of struggling in a maths degree, and that I did for a term, before I realised it was completely the wrong thing for me. But that was a big moment, because I had to really step over this point of being able to make a mistake and learn from it. I think that fear of getting something wrong was so significant for me. It took me back to almost like being a 5-year-old again. It was almost like a trauma response, in some ways. And whilst my life wasn't like some of the young people that I've worked with over the years who had really tough experiences, really difficult things going on, it did have an impact. So as an adult, going into leadership, I think at times my reaction, and it has been a reaction to Ofsted, has been fear. And I think they play on that as well. I think there's times when that, I've heard inspectors talking about in training where they try and split people, they try and divide, and I've had lovely experiences of Ofsted as well. So I'm not trying to make out it's all negative. But I think that bit from my childhood impacted on me. And then the bit as an adult where I've learned that actually, even from things going really wrong in my career at times and feeling like, oh no, I've really messed up, or, it's like maybe I can't do this anymore. That ability to step over that and learn to develop, to realize you've got another day, another chance, is huge. And the opportunity to travel, I think, also gives that, Nicholas. I think that provides its own form of feedback and criticism, because you realize that how many assumptions you make when you travel and you work in different places around the world.
Very, very true. I mean, I certainly found that, and I know lots of my colleagues actually who are used to traveling have found the recent time being locked down very difficult, in the sense of they're not really getting feedback from certain areas. Even if it's just going down to, say, a market, if it's just going doing something different, it's that feeling of being in a different space that can be very, very good for your mental well-being. And I think when you're used to traveling, that kind of feeds into that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and that I think sometimes in the early days of lockdown, I was in repeatedly in meeting after meeting, um, and sat very still, and I really made an effort to make sure that actually every 40 minutes or so I would get up, I'd walk around, I'd stretch, and finding new ways of of shifting that perspective. When I worked with Bo, the neuroscientist in London, we often used to go and walk and talk on our meetings, and it was a different way of. I'd never done that with anybody at that point, and it just really shifted the dynamic of what we were doing. And like you say, something as simple as going to a market. When I was working on design of new buildings and things like that, it was great going. You go to like a hotel and you'd learn so much about how to greet people. If you're designing a school, you want to look at a hotel for the reception area because that's their bread and butter. That's their core business. So how they greet and welcome people into a space and make you interested in what's going to go on there. So yeah, I think those places that can give you that little bit of difference and open up a new train of thought is huge, isn't it?
I think you've alluded to the fact bit before, Dave, and I'm a big believer in this, is education can learn so much from other areas, other sectors, in the same way that other sectors can learn so much from education. Yeah. And just by saying, going into a hotel and looking at it in a different light and then bringing that approach back to a school, why shouldn't we be doing that? And, seeing how we can make things more welcoming in schools.
Yeah, in my previous school in Plymouth, there was a guy, Owen, and his background was hospitality, and he was amazing at greeting people. There was a few people that were as well. Victoria was very good at that as well, and that they had this ability to make you feel like you were the most important person. And I know when I used to do advisory work, there'd be some schools you go into and it was the exact opposite. You were made to feel so uncomfortable within seconds of arriving, and you're sort of thinking, no matter how good everything else is after this, that's going to set a tone in such a big way. Whereas like the people, the Owens and Victorias of the world, they make people feel valued, that you're really interesting as an individual and you're going to be taken care of. And that sets the tone then for everything else that follows in the classrooms and around the school.
I mean, it sounds like your values, Dave, are really aligned to the position that you're working in at the moment. The language that you're using about the beautiful and going to see this and, innovation and all these things that you've kind of drawn on previously in your career is coming to come the fore now, isn't it, with your current role?
Very much so. And I one of the people I was very lucky to work with was a former head teacher, Jeff Stratton, and Jeff, who's in his 80s now, is still working, still in schools, and just the most amazing purposeful person. He's an artist, a philosopher. He's made his own plane. I mean, he's an incredible guy. One of the things that I really learned from him was that sense of urgency in relation to purpose. And I think when I first started, teaching in 1990, I felt like I had lots of time. Whereas now in 2020, sort of in my 50s, coming to the latter part of my career, there's a different urgency, and I want to make sure that all of those things that I've learned. There's some legacy is probably too strong and dramatic.
I was going to say legacy, Dave.
But there is something about that. I haven't got the same amount of time anymore, and I really want to make a difference and share and inspire, staff and students to make a more beautiful world. So we can't hang around with that kind of important agenda.
Again, which brings me on to a final question, which I ask all my guests in this series: is what piece of advice would you give yourself at the start of your teaching career?
Yeah, I feel like I've been very, very lucky throughout my career. I think two things probably I'd focus in on. One is to enjoy the journey. I think there have been times where I've done amazing things and been with amazing people and not always fully enjoyed that journey as much as I probably should have done. When it's gone, you suddenly think, wow, that was amazing. I wish I'd been a bit more aware and awake to what was happening. And I try to do that now. I try to be present and connect to the wonderful things that are happening. So like right at the moment, with us being a very small school, I'm getting the chance to teach again. And whilst I'm a bit rusty, I'm really, really enjoying that opportunity to be working more directly with young people than I had done in the previous 10 years. So to enjoy the journey would be one thing, and the other thing would be something that my mum used to say when she was alive, that life isn't a rehearsal, and you've got to make the most of every moment. And I think I was really scared around that time in 1990, when I would have been given options to go and do exciting things. Like if somebody would have said, you could go to Budapest and, there's a teaching job there. I would have said no. I liked Devon. I liked staying close to my familiar context. And so my final bit of advice to myself would be just to take a few more risks and not be frightened of getting it wrong. Enjoy learning from getting it wrong and enjoy the journey.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dave, and thanks for your insightful and honest conversations. It's very much appreciated.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you too, and look forward to hearing other people on the podcast too.
That's great. Thanks, Dave. If you're interested in working with Pursue through our coaching and leadership development packages, or would like to connect to discuss any of the topics on the show, please send me an email at hello@pursue.com or visit our website, pursue.com. You can also follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at Nicholas Mackay or Pursue. If you enjoy the show, please leave a rating and spread the word. We are proud to be developing a truly global audience. Take care and look forward to speaking to you again soon.